In today's Black Clover video we explain Asta's new magic. This is probably one of our best theories. We show why anti-magic could be a reference to one of the most important concepts in physics, antimatter. Because of this concept, everything in our world has an exact negative counterpart. Water and anti-water, fire and anti-fire, or for example in Black Clover, magic and anti-magic. We explain why it is possible that Liebe is far from having discovered the truest sense of anti-magic, the counterpart of all magic abilities. And we show how it is possible that Asta could awaken his true magic ability by using Liebe's anti-magic instead of normal mana, to then create the counterpart of his true magic ability, whereby he could then even use anti-magic spells. Also, only a small percentage of the people who watch our videos are actually subscribed, so if you end up liking this video, consider subscribing. Please enjoy this video. Let's go! It is very important that you watch this video until the end, because we show how this theory could possibly explain why Asta is able to use the true ability of the Demon Dweller's sword, even though he has no mana. The biggest argument why many fans believe that Asta can't use the second magic is because, first of all, Liebe's anti-magic could automatically cancel out any magic Asta could use. And if this were not the case, they don't like the general idea of Asta being able to use magic, because it seems to go against the concept of Black Clover. But if Asta was to get magic, then that magic would have to fit perfectly with anti-magic, which is nearly impossible. But we have the perfect solution how Asta's new magic could merge together with Liebe's anti-magic to create a whole new magic ability based on the concept of antimatter. Pretty much everything in our universe is made of matter. The earth, the air, you and me, and even magic if magic will be real. But for every particle there is an equivalent but opposite antiparticle that has exactly the same properties, with the difference that it is oppositely charged. And since these antiparticles have an opposite charge, they annihilate each other when a particle and an antiparticle meet. Just like the anti-magic in Black Clover can destroy any magic. But we also know that the destruction of magic and mana is not the only effect of anti-magic, because Asta has shown several concepts of how anti-magic works without simply destroying other magic. For example, when Asta used Licht swords with anti-magic, he changes the properties of the swords and creates a different effect than Licht does when he uses the sword with mana. This is an important clue that anti-magic can not only cancel out other magic, but can also be used in a different way, if that possibility exists, such as when Asta would awaken his true magic. More on this in a moment. But what is anti? Think of crystal magic, ice magic, or star magic, for example. You know exactly what crystal, ice, and star is, but what is anti? If crystal, ice, and star are part of all magic, shouldn't there be anti-crystal, anti-ice, and anti-star? Just like it is the case in our real world with antimatter. Every aspect of anti-magic in Black Clover is reminiscent of antimatter. If this is really the case and antimatter is the inspiration for anti-magic, then all magic abilities must be matter. So let's break it down. Magic exists in two forms. First, magic that is based on simple physical substances. For example, water magic is nothing but water, which in turn is matter. Wind magic is wind, steel magic is steel, and bone magic is bone. The second form of magic is based on concepts, such as gravity magic, which is normal gravity, while gravity is a form of energy. Anything that has a force is energy, and thus any conceptual magic ability is also energy. Energy equals mc square. It means that mass is concentrated energy, so we can say mass is energy. So all magical abilities based on concepts like dream, thread, and time are also part of matter and therefore affected by antimatter if magic would be real in our world, where antimatter is a real thing. But in the world of Black Clover nothing is mentioned about antimatter. But we know that there is anti-magic, which has an identical effect to antimatter. Anti-magic is not only effective against physical substances, but also against all kinds of conceptual magic abilities. This is a very strong similarity between antimatter and anti-magic, so strong in fact that it is worth digging deeper. I hope you are still here, because now it gets even better. Every fundamental particle has an antiparticle, anti-quarks, anti-neutrinos, anti-electrons, and so on, since antimatter particles are essentially identical to regular matter, except for the opposite charge. They interact with other antiparticles in exactly the same way as ordinary particles interact with each other, and can combine in identical ways. For example, to form antiprotons, anti-atoms, or anti-molecules, and thus everything from anti-elements to even anti-magic anti-magic in Black Clover, for example. So anti-water, anti-wind, anti-fire, and anti-earth are all real in our world. This is not a fantasy. But the fact that there's so little antimatter in the universe means that we will never see things like anti-elements. This is an obvious thing, because if it were part of our world, it would have destroyed us. But then there's also the world of Black Clover, where one person is able to use anti-magic, which is extremely similar to antimatter. And as Nacht said, anti-magic is the ultimate weapon. Or to quote the Witch Queen, in your presence all magic is meaningless. If we assume that anti-magic really equates to antimatter, then there could be things like anti-wind even in Black Clover. Because remember, wind is nothing but magic. And anti-magic includes all magic, at least semantically speaking. And now it's very important. We know that at first, Liebe had no magic at all, not even any ability. But after he was sealed in the 5-leaf clover grimoire, he began to manifest anti-magic, and with training he has reached a state where he could destroy magic. But has Liebe's anti-magic really reached the end of its evolution? Definitely not. We know that all humans have magic, and Asta probably does too. But Asta can't show his magic because he has no mana, and thus could never even figure out what magic ability he was born with. But if anti-magic is like the physical concept of antimatter, then maybe Asta could use anti-magic instead of mana to use the counterpart of his true magic ability. The point is that anti-magic has no spells so far and is very limited in its use. But if Asta can get an anti-magic influenced magic ability and even a second grimoire, then Asta would not literally get a new magic, but anti-magic spells based on Asta's true magic ability. With this solution, everyone should be happy, because Asta wouldn't be using mana, his new magic will be on par with anti-magic spells, and his anti-magic will evolve and become more complex without changing its attribute. And most importantly, Asta will contribute to Liebe's anti-magic, and he would no longer be the one who can only fight thanks to Liebe, but both will equally create a new, unique, true magic. Liebe gives the essence and Asta gives the ability, the awakening of the true anti-magic ability. Before my partner Yami continues with this video, please take a moment to leave a like. It really helps us a lot, and share this video everywhere. I really love this theory. Thank you.
If the concept of antimatter really equates to anti-magic, then we still don't know how anti-magic could affect magical abilities when used instead of mana. Perhaps it would negatively affect all the properties of magic, causing the exact opposite of Asta's true magical ability. The most obvious possibility for Asta's true magic is his mother's magic. Lisita used the magic to store mana-less items and creatures in other items, which allowed her to carry large amounts of things without worrying about weight, size, or shape. She usually used small bottles. So if anti-magic was used instead of mana to create this magic ability, then Asta could create the exact opposite effect to this ability, and thus be able to store all magic in other objects, which would fit perfectly with his Demon Dweller's Sword. And who knows, maybe every time Asta used his Demon Dweller's Sword to store other magic abilities, he was actually using his own magic in combination with anti-magic, thus creating the exact opposite effect of Lisita's ability to store monoless objects into other objects. I mean, how else could Asta use Licht swords if using such a technique requires mana to begin with, even though Asta has no mana at all? It's a very intriguing thought. Maybe it was foreshadowed all along and we just didn't understand why Asta could use the Demon Dweller's Sword ability without having any mana at all. Speaking of the Demon Dweller's Sword, Asta might then even be able to turn any absolved magic into its anti-magic counterpart. But even if we assume that Asta was able to use the original Demon Dweller's Sword ability, not because he used anti-magic to create the counterpart of Lisita's magic, but for some other reason, he may still be able to create very interesting things with anti-magic when he manipulates the absorbed magic. The original ability of the sword is to absorb spells and then release that magic in a flying slash. After the sword has absorbed a certain amount of magic power, the black markings on the sword begin to glow in a color that corresponds to the absorbed magic attribute. When the user then swings the sword, it unleashes a flying slash with similar properties to the absorbed magic attribute. Alternatively, it can be filled with anti-magic to unleash flying slashes composed entirely entirely of anti-magic. We know that anti-magic can cancel out magic, but what if Li Bei finds a way to use anti-magic that corresponds with antimatter, allowing him to convert any magic his demon dweller soul absorbed into its counterpart, creating anti-magic abilities such as anti-water magic. Another example of how anti-magic could affect Asta's true magic ability would be if we assume, for example, that Alan is somehow related to Lysitha, perhaps her brother, and therefore would also be related to Asta. Then, another possible magic that Asta could have due to his genetic inheritance could be fire magic, and due to the influence of anti-magic, he could be able to create anti-fire. This fire would then have the exact opposite properties of normal fire. Perhaps it could be cold flames that burn until they burn their target to ashes, or maybe flames that create ice. I think you get the idea. There are several possible options. Let's say Asta was born with star magic, which would fit Asta's name, which means bright as a star in Latin. It would fit with his star eyes in Black Guardian, as well as all the symbols on his body or the clothes. Then he would awaken anti-star magic because he would use Li Bei's anti-magic instead of normal mana. This would be a perfect match for Yuno and would allow Asta to use a lot of anti-magic spells, which we think should be the point of a second magic ability. But it could really be any kind of magic. Let us know in the comments below which anti-magic magical ability would suit Asta the best. So that's it for today, folks. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, don't forget to smash the like button, and if you're new to our channel, make sure you subscribe with the notification bell turned on. See you guys in the next video. Yummy out.